Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hollywood Matt Connelly. Welcome to the Daily Combat Podcast with double biceps. It is a legal requirement every single time we appear on camera. We'll make sure we get those in frame. There we go. Just need to satisfy the lawyers. They do question things. So, yes, got to sign off on that. Both of the biceps were seen fully and were displayed effectively.
Yes.
I believe that's the wording. Yeah, so
effectively.
That's right.
That's what we want to see.
So the co-host, the co-founder, the co-pilot, the co-wearer of clothes, co-breather of air in this very room, it is in fact the King of Sting, the Master of Disaster, the Count of Monte Cristo. It is in fact the winner of the Dave Stockbridge of the Year Award. There it is there, the illustrious trophy. He's put his nomination in already. It is, in fact, Dave Stockbridge. Stockbridge, welcome to your own show.
Thank you very much, Hollywood Matt Connelly. A wonderful welcome as always, and I certainly appreciate it. It's always exciting for me to receive an introduction of that standard and calibre. Week in, week out, you never fail to disappoint. Hollywood Matt Connelly's been a big week in the world of arm wrestling, and some players are making moves, it would seem to me. And so today we're going to be talking about some of the biggest movers in the arm wrestling world, what it is that they're up to. And we've been very lucky. We've been privy to some information that's come across the AWE desks over recent days. And so we're going to share a little bit of that with you all today so that you can be up to date and understand exactly what is going on behind the scenes of some of the biggest promotions in the arm wrestling world. Hollywood Matt Connelly, AWE, obviously movers and shakers, big event coming up on the 1st of July if you're in the US, 2nd of July if you're here in Australia, and some big names taking place in that one. But it's not the only promotion in the world, as it turns out. It's not the only one.
It isn't.
There are other ones, and so I guess in the arm wrestling world right now, it'd be pretty fair to say that you've got King of the Table and East versus West. They're the two big guys. It was very much a duopoly until fairly recently, and they certainly filled that void that was created by the loss of WAL pre-COVID, and then out of the ashes of that, obviously, and as the borders started to open up, it was King of the Table and East versus West that jumped into operation and started putting on some awesome shows. And between those two, I mean, they're the two big guys at the moment. So let's put them against each other here. What are the pros and cons? What do you like about what King of the Table's doing? And what do you like about what East versus West is doing? What could they both do better? And who of those two are your favourite promotions right now?
Well, yeah, so Larry Wheels is sort of behind the King of the Table organisation, him and a few other players in that world, and bringing a big audience based off of his social media following, which is fantastic for the sport of arm wrestling. You know, people that are fans of Larry, and they should be because he's a great guy. I mean, he's very charismatic, and he's enormously strong, and looks fantastic.
But soft hands, I understand.
Very soft hands. Yeah, when I met him, it was like putting my hand into a cloud. It was it was surprisingly soft. And apparently he moisturizes. That's the secret.
Ah, right. Good to know.
Yeah, especially for someone that lifts weights like he does. So
yeah,
it threw me. I was my next sentence was gone after that. But obviously he's found arm wrestling and become a fan of it, and then decided that he would put some matches together. And obviously he's created the King of the Table, and they've flown in some big names and put on some big events. He must have reached out to a production company and said, "This is what my ideas are. This is how I want you to do it." And they've put on some awesome events. They've said some of the big names. They've had Davin Larratt. They've had John Brasing. And Larry has competed on there several times as well. One of the things that I really liked about what Larry does and did on his very first match, he took on Schoolboy, who is a phenomenal arm wrestler and a world champion currently. And Larry was like, well, my first match, I'm going to go against Schoolboy. It's like, well, okay, but the appeal of that, and I really admire the fact that he did this, is, Schoolboy looks like a schoolboy. I mean, he's wearing a Mickey Mouse t-shirt, he's got a backpack, he's got the glasses. He wasn't as humongous as he is now, and he's like 6'6" now or something. But it was the classic David versus Goliath sort of matchup. And Larry very cleverly, whether he chose to identify this or not, from the outsider's perspective or the audience perspective, they've been looking at Larry and going, well, this guy's probably just going to crush this dude. Like, you know, Larry's like a gorilla, like he's enormous. And then you've got a school kid, and obviously Schoolboy is absolutely, he's a phenomenal arm wrestler, and he comfortably handled Larry on the table. But it was awesome to.
But it was a spectacle,
exactly.
And I guess he brought an element of entertainment to arm wrestling, where he brought this an unknown quantity in himself, who had this amazing physicality, and pitted himself against a technically superior arm wrestler, and but of course it opened up conversations about can Larry do this? Is he strong enough? He's been practicing with some of the best in the world, but it was a real conversation creator, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely! It was so good for the sport of arm wrestling, and so many new people would have found the sport because of Larry doing that. And they've put on several events. I'm not sure if they've got anything planned at the moment. They probably do. I haven't looked at the schedule because I've been looking at everything AWE. But yeah, then they're not stacking the cards with 30 matches and stuff like that. One of the things that I do like that they're doing quite well is they're just putting on events with maybe 3 matches, maybe 4 matches.
Yeah,
and
so they're really going for quality rather than just putting on a 7-hour arm wrestling event.
Yes, and that is a very smart move, because everyone wants to just see Larry, or everyone wants to just see Devin. And then if you're sitting there waiting for 5 hours to see them, and it's like, forget it, I'll just watch it on YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah,
so you've got that element there, which I think they've really nailed that. Less is more in that realm. And using that star power. So their production has been good. They have improved event to event. I think when we saw the first one, it looked like it was in a casino.
Yeah, it looked like in a function room or something. Yeah,
there was people sort of wandering through.
This is on their way. Some people on their phones in the background.
Exactly. Yeah. So those elements, they have changed, and they've identified it, and it just doesn't look so fantastic when we're putting this to air. So they are doing good things. My concern is that, recent footage that I've seen of Larry, he is looking strong, and he is continuing to arm wrestle, and he's actually improved significantly. What I would be concerned with is if Larry loses interest in that sport or in that realm, and starts focusing on something else, it might fall away. It might just be all based on.
So your fear is that maybe it's a Larry Wills passion project, more so than a standalone organisation that's going to stand the test of time, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't see it running to the same degree or with the same verve without Larry.
Well, maybe we can get Larry on and he can clarify for us what the future plans for King of the Table might be, or get Jake on, because from what I understand, Jake's been announced again as the King of the Table announcer and commentator. So
awesome.
Maybe we can get a little bit of background information from those chaps. So, and East versus West, kind of the opposite in that they're less discriminant in terms of how many matches they'll be willing to put on the card. Seemingly more is more is the philosophy there. And being East versus West, there's a lot of names there that don't quite resonate with a Western audience. So is that deliberate is that a deliberate ploy on behalf of Engen in order to introduce some of these Eastern names to the Western world, do you think? And is that worth the hassle? Or what do you think's going on there? And do you think that having such a big card is a good thing for a pay-per-view event?
So I like the fact that they've got immediate patriotism built into their event. So if you're if you don't know anything about these guys, it's like, okay, well, this guy's from my part of the world, I'm going to go for him. I'm from America, I'm going for the West, in this match, or maybe all of the matches. If you're from Europe, or it's like, well, great, I've got my guy that I'm going to cheer for. And so you don't have to know who the people are, because the patriotism side of it does take care of that in terms of he's somebody you can cheer for. He's from your part of the world. He's representing you in a way, you know. So that aspect is quite clever, and you'll see that across sports all throughout the world, where people have country versus country, or state versus state, or or anything where it's like we have a group of people that represent you. They're from down the street.
It's that tribalism, isn't it? It's what brings people to the event. So I'd be really interested to see what the pay-per-view purchase split would be between the East and the West, for instance, as well.
That's a good point. I would say the majority would probably be coming from the US, but I might be wrong. I'm not sure, but I would say that's usually who drives pay-per-view audiences. But so they have put on cards with a lot of matches, which is we've got a vacuum cleaner going.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
I could hear the soft hum. I thought it was a car alarm or something in the background, but there we go.
Oh, it stopped. Okay. It was a very small amount of dust.
Might have been a blender.
Right. So yes, East versus West, putting on cards with a lot of matches, 15, 16, 20 matches, and it is a bit of a slog to get through, especially
do you watch all the way through?
When I've done live commentary, I have.
Oh, you had to?
Yeah. I fast-forwarded the live commentary.
So is it like an arm wrestling marathon? Is that what it feels like?
It feel like that. And I was very excited for the main matches. And, there was maybe 4 matches near the top of the card that I really wanted to see. But by the time we got there, I almost just wanted to just be over with. Because it was like, this has been 6 hours or 6.5 hours. And we still got 4 matches to go. And it's like, by the time we've got to that point, it was like, man, I'm kind of tired. Like, it's been a lot to watch. But if you're buying the event, maybe you'd skip through the first 12, 15 matches just to see your favourites. But I do like the fact that Engen's created an aspect where he can find the best people in Europe, or best people that he knows from that realm, and give them an opportunity. I think it would be smarter to create a separate league in a way where you've got East versus West is maybe very similar to the King of the Table sort of idea. Maybe there's 5 matches, maybe there's 6 at the most, and it's like
make that the creme de la creme,
and it's going to be fantastic and phenomenal, and everyone's going to be keen as to see it. It goes for maybe 2.5 hours, and it's just it's like a movie length, and then everyone's invested in every single match. Yeah. Whereas at the moment you've got so many matches with people that the undercard. Yeah. And it's like, if you put that on a separate card and tried to build sort of feeder league, and then if people are doing well in that, and then you can promote them, and maybe they'll get the opportunity to get on the big card. Yeah. Whereas it feels like, because they're the only promotion going, that anybody who's sort of at that level, they're like, oh yeah, we'll just put you on the card. Yeah. And it's like, well, instead of having 20 matches, why didn't you just have a separate league where you've got the elite guys with your pay-per-view, where it's going to do big numbers regardless, because people aren't paying for the 12 matches leading up to. Yeah. So, and then you get an opportunity to put on an event and build some stars that can go into the elite status.
Well, from what I understand, Engen takes on a lot of that event on his own shoulders, and so maybe a wise move for a man that's got a lot on his plate, that he's kind of delegating out to established organisations, clubs and the like, to say, hey, make your event a qualifier for mine. So he might be even moving in that direction, and that'd be a good way to filter through talent from those parts of the world. Yeah. And to maybe deliver him a high quality card. It's interesting because it is both East versus West and King of the Table are pay-per-view models. So it's essentially, these are pay-per-view events, and so they're highly reliant on those numbers in order to be profitable. And from what I understand from public statements of Engen's, that he's not making a considerable profit out of the event, or in some cases no profit. All the money's being ploughed. Whatever's being made is being ploughed straight back into the event, the production. And so as a pay-per-view event, if it's not necessarily profitable with that I guess those numbers, does it become more profitable with half the numbers, half the travel expenses, half the organisation involved? Maybe not. There's some interesting things going on both East versus West. So let's just really quickly, production values. If you had to rate them out of 10, king of the table.
King of the Table is improved, and I think where they started
at a
it was
4,
probably 4 to 5, and they've probably pushed up to a 7.
East versus West.
Their atmosphere is lacking.
The
camera work is great, and they've got some good.
So production's good. It's just the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because I was going to talk about atmosphere as a separate kind of thing. So in terms of atmosphere, East versus West, you rank that.
Well, it's not an ideal. Wherever they're holding it, it seems like it's on a stage and there's a theatre behind them, and it's like this doesn't seem to suit.
It's very European in nature in terms of how to present it in that auditorium type of environment. Atmospheric king of the table. It's improved dramatically, hasn't
absolutely,
it?
Yeah. And especially the involvement of people that are actually standing next to the table now, not just sort of looking at their phones, they're actually wanting to see the match.
I think the strength of personality, Jake's strength of personality makes a big difference too, and just in terms of the energy that's in the room,
yes.
And how that's translated on the screen, and in terms of quality of competitor, king of the table, East versus West. You reckon they're about the same?
Yeah, I think they've used pretty similar on
names,
both cards.
Big names. So we're talking like they're getting the top guys at the moment. So you have to say 10 out of 10 in terms of quality of the athletes. People are really tuning in because of Devon Larratt, Dave Chafee, these big names that are out there, Levan. People are tuning in because they want to see what the biggest and the best are up to in the world and want to see those guys up against themselves. I guess there you go. There's the longevity question mark that hangs over both of those promotions currently, because these athletes are now in their 40s, in some cases 50s, and nudging near 60 in some cases, and it's really musical chairs at the moment amongst those big names. And so maybe Engen's ploy of trying to get that next generation of athlete through those qualifiers is the right path, and certainly seems to be leading in a good direction. I don't see King of the Table making any move in that direction in order to cultivate that next generation of talent. Before we get into the rest, I just want to thank Roll Clean. Roll Clean have been wonderful supporters of our podcast, AWE, and the Daily Combat podcast. And although you shouldn't eat them, I don't mind having a nibble. And and Matt and Kat tell me don't say that, but they do look delicious. And not only that, but I will say this: I have not used shampoo since I've been using Roll Clean. I don't use any products in my beard apart from Roll Clean products. So they've got a wonderful beard oil, which I'll apply in the shower after washing with the Roll Clean soap. So they're organically produced, locally produced, organic ingredients, and really good for your skin. Disinfectants. They're designed specifically for strength and combat sports athletes, and so we would suggest that you head over to www.rollclean.com.au if you would also like to have a nice luscious beard, nice smooth skin.
Both of us have that now because I do the same. Yeah.
You do the same. Yeah. Well, there you go. So, it endorsed by your favourite arm wrestling fans here on the AWE podcast. www.rollclean.com.au. Head over there right now and grab yourself some of these yummy. No, don't eat the soaps. That's so. They
do look like you could eat them, and one is chocolate flavored,
just to make it all the more irresistible. So, So we've got. I guess that you've got King of the Table, East versus West. You'd call them the top tier right now, and not necessarily because of their production values, or anything else really. It's just they've got the biggest names currently, so they're attracting the biggest names in the sport. Now, the second tier. Where do you see the second tier right now?
Yeah, well, the exciting thing is that there is arm wrestling organisations sort of springing up around the world, and not only with the AWE, our organisation that we've started, and trying to put on the best matches that we possibly can, but we're seeing event organizations like Arm Gods and Monster Factory. I know that India has a very big league over there as well.
Punjab,
Punjab, yes.
I think, yeah.
And we've got the UAC.
Yep.
That is emerging in the Philippines, Asian area as well.
Singapore.
Yeah. So it's great to see that the sport is getting to a point where people are saying, okay, well, we want to put an event on and we want to create an organisation. We see that there is potential growth in this sport, and so you get an organisation like Monster Factory, and so Michael Todd. I always go to put his name in the wrong order.
Monster Todd?
Monster Michael Todd. He has created the Monster Factory, which is it his gym? I believe it's in his gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's his gym in Arkansas, and he is putting on events, and he's gone about this quite in a smart way where it's free to watch on YouTube.
Yeah, so a really defining point there. So that's very different to the East versus West King of the Table models, and he's able to do that in large part because he's backed by big name sponsors.
Yeah, he's done tremendously well for himself. I mean, the guy. He's very charismatic. He's a lovely guy.
He's a great guy.
He does get the villain role a lot in the arm wrestling world. But he's if you ever watch an interview with him or watch a video with Michael Todd, he is actually a really nice person.
Really humble.
Very, very passionate about arm wrestling, extremely.
Yeah.
And so he's created his own organization in America and said, well, I'm going to put events on. I'm going to do it right here in my shed in Arkansas, in my gym. And they've done a really good job. So it's him and his wife Rebecca, and they do the commentary, and they also compete as well.
Yeah,
and it feels very homely, like very community. Feel to it.
There's a real familial kind of sense about it. Everybody knows everybody. It's very everybody's really comfortable in each other's company. There's a real intimacy, not just amongst the personalities involved, but physically. Like it's a tighter space, and so everybody's kind of there together. And you've got the athletes kind of behind the commentary team, and so it's got a very distinctive feel to anything else that's in the arm wrestling world right now.
It does, absolutely. Yeah, it's very unique in that aspect. And as you mentioned before, the ability to be able to go free on YouTube because of the sponsorship deals that they've created, it changes the game for them in terms of they're not relying on a pay-per-view model. So they're not relying on having to sell you these matches. I mean, obviously, they want people to watch and they want people to be interested in who they've created, but they don't have that pressure of, I need to sell 10,000 pay-per-view sales to make my money back.
It's really cool that Michael's leveraged his own brand in order to help others compete. Because it really is Michael's sponsors that are getting on board. It's obviously at Michael's house, and he's really leveraging his own name in order to provide this opportunity and to create this event. So it's very personality centric in that way. You remove Monster Michael Todd from the equation, well, there isn't a Monster Factory. That's right. But I've got a feeling that Monster Michael Todd's going to be around forever. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue. And I am somewhat excited for the future of Monster Factory. So, I mean, so a couple of the criticisms might be around, say, production values and how it looks and feels on the screen, which I don't know is a massive issue for a lot of Monster Michael Todd fans and for fans of the athletes that are competing. But it seems that Monster Michael Todd is moving in a direction to address some of that. I did note that he posted just recently that the renovations and the extensions have begun at his property, and he's got a pretty substantial property. And from what we understand is that he's now in the process of extending on to that gym, and so you might start to see things move in terms of the production values and the set and how that Monster Factory event looks and feels into the future.
Absolutely, yeah. The difference between, say, King of the Table with Larry Wheels and Monster Factory with Monster Michael Todd is Monster Michael Todd's going to be an arm wrestler for life. I mean, he's been in the sport for probably 40 years already, and he's world champion like 30 times. I don't know. He's got the biggest trophy cabinet I've ever seen with the million trophies in there.
Should be called Monster Trophy
Cabinet. Factory, yes. The Monster Trophy Factory, yeah. So, he's going to be in that regardless. And it's not as if things don't work out, I'm sure that he will continue to be in the arm wrestling scene and he'll still be part of it. Whereas I think with King of the Table, if Larry Wheels removes himself from that, I think the entire organization just disappears. But yes, the passion that Monster Michael Todd has, and it does have the element of, it's not a club, it's not like going to the club, the local arm wrestling club and watching matches. Yeah, it's a little bit. It's above that,
but it's got enough of that feel, hasn't it? Yeah. Where it's it's very everybody's friends.
Yes,
it's everybody's enjoying each other's company. They're enjoying the competition, but straight afterwards, everybody's just having a beer and relaxing, and it's got a really nice feel. And I think that's a real interesting point that you made. You take Larry Wheels at the King of the Table event may be somewhat dependent on, well, two things is my read: big names and Larry's crossover appeal, bringing new people into the sport and attracting their attention to his event. I think that's so you got arm wrestlers and you got people that are arm wrestling curious because of maybe Larry Wheels, or just love Larry Wheels, and so if Larry's competing, they'll be there, so. There's that element. You take Larry hive him out of that scenario, and maybe you can't get Devon, can't get LeBron, you can't get Dave Chafee, and you take away some of the big names. What does King of the Table then have? If it doesn't have Larry Wheels and it doesn't have the big names competing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a different scenario. Whereas Monster Michael Todd, in the Monster Factory, seems to be drawing very much from that pool of talent that hasn't yet made the A grade yet, and those people that are knocking on the door, and who are keen to create opportunities so that they can get more awareness, get sponsors themselves, and put themselves in a position where they can compete for the biggest prizes in the sport. People that are really on a pathway, and it seems that Monster Michael Todd is doing a lot of that groundwork for those athletes to provide this platform for them to take that next step in the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head with that. Yeah, absolutely. It feels very much like he's not only promoting the athletes that are competing on his card and giving them an opportunity and a spotlight to compete and show their skills, but he's doing it from an aspect where he gets to compete as well. He does it under his own banner. He does it under his own rule set. He's sort of the man that gets to display this event which way he chooses. So he can control all those elements and make them run in the way that he wants to. And it does have a very much this is a friendly, it's fun, it's great matches that you get to see. There is obviously a very serious element, like the people that are competing, they really want to win, but it doesn't feel like that serious, deadly silence that you get with East versus West or something like that, which is that other element of arm wrestling, because essentially, I mean, that's where the roots of arm wrestling comes from, is those clubs and pubs and the community centres and stuff, and everyone's laughing, having a good time and enjoying themselves. And so it's almost that next step up into, okay, this is the competition world, and it's like these are the top guys that are not the elite guys, but if you good luck trying to beat any of them. But
that's right.
But it has that appeal, and I think that they would harm themselves if they went too, not corporate, but like if they went very professional, like, and they had like they were all wearing suits and they were presenting with the perfect banner behind them, and and they had great fade transitions into the thing. It'd be like, this isn't the same thing. This isn't Monster Factory. Yeah, it just wouldn't work. It would feel false.
So if we would apply the same kind of criteria to Monster Michael Todd's production, in terms of production values, out of 10.
Yeah, for what they're aiming for, I think they've really nailed it. Like in terms of what they what their what their direction is. They've really hit
So
that.
they've isolated their demographic, and they know what their appeal is, and they seem to be really playing to that audience. And so you can't really take them down a peg or say they're doing the wrong thing, because they're actually positioning themselves to cater for that audience and to have that more casual feel, aren't they? So,
it's hard to say like, oh, it should be more production, because it's like, well, the production will ruin like what the elements that you've created.
Whereas it seems East versus West and the King of the Table are very much trying to do almost a very, very similar thing production-wise. With Monster Factory, it is a different look and feel. And I guess that that's we'll come to Arm Gods in a second, because that's very much down that road as well. So you've got so in terms of production value, in terms of quality of athlete, out of 10.
In terms of quality of athlete, it's probably the guys that haven't quite hit the elite level, but are the top guys in North America, which is a really high level. So I'd say
10,
8 to 9.
8 to 9, 8 to 9 in your estimations. And in terms of length and depth of card, what are your feelings there? It's still a meaty card.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they are putting on events with 8 to 10 sort of matches. They are generally putting on matches that are quite interesting, and they seem to space out their top guys. They're not saving everyone for the last, the main event. Obviously, the main event is your premier event, but they do have say Monster Michael
sprinkle
Todd,
the card.
With a few he'll be competing on the card, and he might be the second match in.
Yeah,
and then it's like Corey West might be on there. He might be the match after, and it's like, I better watch this whole thing, because I think the reason he's doing it that way is because he wants to get back on the commentary. Once he gets his match out of the way, and then
but also for the same reason you said that perhaps East versus West is not the most stimulating of events to be watching until maybe the 4 or 5 that you're really holding out for. Michael Todd's mixing it up a little bit there. He's making sure that you're watching the whole event, because if you miss the first 2 or 3, you might be missing a Corey West or Monster Michael Todd himself jumping on the table and going lefty or something.
It feels very much like, if you're going to see a Monster Factory event, it's something you put on and you sit back with a beer and your friends, and you all just sort of hang around, you're casually talking, and maybe you're not paying 100% attention the whole time, but then it's like, oh, no, Michael Todd's on, hang on. And then everyone's like, oh, and, they're keyed in for that moment. But it does feel like you don't need to be glued to every single second of it, like you would if the way that East versus West or King of the Table tries to present. And it's like, oh, this is a very important match. It's like it's somebody you've never heard of versus somebody else you've never heard of.
Trying to generate gravitas out of something nobody cares about is often hard. So doing great things, and super excited to see what happens in that in the next chapter as the new Monster Factory takes shape, and excited to see what happens with Monster Factory moving forward. I think Michael and Rebecca are onto something, and are doing some very exciting things there. And I think they're providing a wonderful platform for that second tier of athlete that's waiting for their chance to emerge on the card of King of the Table or East versus West, and waiting for that opportunity. Arm Gods, touched on Arm Gods. So talking about look and feel and atmosphere, out of 10. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
These guys know their atmosphere inside out. Paul Maiden, Marcus Thompson, they're very much talking about community appeal. These guys have gone headfirst into, everyone who is here in person is going to have the night of their lives. Yeah. And they're playing music, they're cheering, they're doing the cheer thing. Everyone there is very excited. They're very close to the table. The crowd is very close. You could almost grab the guy who's actually competing.
a lot of intimacy, and some of those guys have been grabbed. By the way,
yeah, that's right. Yes, by Jody Norris. So they have that ability to create the atmosphere. And as they said, their first event, they had to turn people away because it was so popular. People were like, "Oh yeah, we want to go see that," and it was like the pub or wherever they were holding it could only hold I don't know, 150, 200 people, and they had like 100 people that had to be like, we're at capacity, we can't. Go and watch it on on the pay-per-view.
Which is kind of insane. When Marcus and Paul were in conversation with us recently, they were explaining that, as far as they're aware, they're the only arm wrestling event to ever sell out in person.
Yeah.
So they're not just relying on the pay-per-view sales. They don't have a dependence on it in the same way that the other promotions do, and certainly Michael Todd doesn't. They've got an audience there, a willing audience, who they've literally created something that people are they're getting turned away at the door if they haven't already got a ticket. So, and I think now that the world has kind of seen what Armed Gods is all about, I think they're just going to have to get bigger venues. I think that's just what's going to happen. They at their first event, if they're turning away 50 or 100 people, I would hate to think how much money is going to be left on the table if they don't get a bigger venue. So, I think they could easily have 300 or 400 people in a room and 300 or 400 arm wrestling fans bound together around a table with Jake Ward on the microphone is a sight to see, and almost like all of a sudden become a bit of a bucket list feature for anybody who's an arm wrestling fan. All of a sudden it's like, go to an Arm Gods event. Yeah. I've got to do that before I die.
Absolutely.
So it's on my list, I know. So they're doing some really interesting things there. And their model isn't dependent on pay-per-view. It's not even dependent on those gate sales. They've got some other things going on there that are going to make that whole event sustainable into the future, which certainly leave for the boys to share with the world when the time's right. But they're doing some really interesting things to support that next generation of athlete and to give them a platform. So we love the atmosphere of Armed Gods. We love what they're doing, the ethic of what they're doing. They've certainly got their own look and feel, which is really set them apart. So they've got a marketing point of difference, and they're really creating an event for the spectator in a way that no one else has been able to do in arm wrestling so far. Yeah. So they're really setting some benchmarks there. So in terms of atmosphere, out of 10?
They're 11.
They're 11. In terms of now, this is the interesting thing. So hugely, highly watchable, really, really great atmosphere, but quality of contestants. Where would you rate that?
Probably, or comparatively to
we've got to compare them to the best.
Yeah,
so
maybe,
East versus West,
maybe 6. I'd say 6 to 7.
So is it fair to say that they're more concerned about a competitive matchup than a big name?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
and so it's really about creating an atmosphere, creating a very good matchup, being very mindful about who they're putting on the table together, and then just creating a show around it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, as we said, I mean, Paul Maiden and Marcus Thompson, Marcus coming from the business background, understanding how things work, and Paul having an in-depth knowledge of the arm wrestling world. And I think he said he was the champion, British champion, like 20-something times or something, or European champion. He's a phenomenal arm wrestler, and they know their audience, they know their crowd. And he did mention, we had a nice chat with him last week, he did mention several times that they looked at the darts model, the people that are throwing darts, and how that they've created like a huge...
It's almost a festival atmosphere, isn't it? Yeah, when you go to one of those events.
Exactly. And, they're playing music and everyone there is cheering, and the dart players are walking in, and there's like, fireworks going off in it. And it's like a huge, big event.
Yep.
And it's darts. And it's like, I mean, if you're interested in darts, cool. But he said, half the time people that are at the event, they're not watching the darts. They're there because it's fun. They've really hit that side of it. And it's sort of similar to like soccer or football, where the crowd is really invested, and they're singing, and they've got their colours, and they've got their favourites, and they're cheering. So very, very clever marketing.
So it's interesting because Engen's trying to create this tribalism between East versus West. You really don't have any of those elements in King of the Table, and perhaps Monster Factory, but you certainly it's there for all to see in Arm Gods, where you've got some very good high quality athletes, but essentially people it's almost secondary to the overall show.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan, well, the great thing with it is that if you're a fan, you're going to love it. And if you're not a fan, there's every chance you'll have a great time anyway. So
that's right.
So they're really looking to expand the appeal of the sport outside of the arm wrestling fan by just putting on a better, in their view, a better quality show.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to be that they're
or a more entertaining show.
Absolutely. Yeah, their model it's very much focused around the live event. Attend the live event, you'll have a phenomenal time. And the production side of things, in terms of the way it was presented, could have been improved a little bit. There were some lighting issues I think that they had. It was quite dark. But, obviously they've identified that.
First shows, yeah.
As we know with the first show. Exactly. But they're going to be doing phenomenal things. I think one of the exciting things about their model is that they could put on events very regularly. And because, say, they're looking at a 300, 400 people event, they could do it probably every 2 months, and you'd get huge crowds there, depending on where you're putting it on, because you're not reliant on those big names. It's just like Arm Gods is here. They're going to be at the...
Have they announced where the next event's going to be publicly as yet?
I don't know.
Okay, so we won't touch on it because it's big news. But I think what's really interesting with Arm Gods as well, you've got East versus West is stuck in Istanbul. You've got Dubai, which is the home of King of the Table. You've got Arm Gods that are not going to be centered on one particular event. And Michael Todd, the Monster Factory is at the Monster Factory.
That's right.
That's going to be where it is. So people all know that they're the epicenters of that activity. But when it comes to Arm Gods, they're inclined to take the road on the show, the show on the road, and the road on the show,
and the road with them as well.
And so this is going to be super exciting as they move forward and start putting arm wrestling in different settings. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, and I think that there's many more runs on the board that we'll see from those guys as Arm Gods continues to evolve and develop. And I think of those second tier promotions at the moment, that's the one where I think is got huge potential. Right now, I think there's some exciting things on the horizon with those boys, and really looking forward to seeing the second event.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and obviously the AWE are our organisation, should we talk about?
Let's be objective.
Yes, what we're looking to do in terms of our strategy, and obviously we've gone with high end production for the online audience for global appeal. Which
is almost the opposite to Marcus and Paul.
Course.
Yeah,
we had in our first event, the audience. Well, there was barely any audience there because we held it in a place that was locked.
That's right. There were so many people that wanted to come that we had to lock the gates to avoid any kind of stampede.
Exactly. Yes, but completely flipping the script on what Arm Gods is pushing for creating a fantastic experience for the live audience. We were not as concerned about the live audience. I mean, obviously, we want the people that are there to have a good time and be able to see what's going on and be entertained. But our main objective was to present the event with the highest level of production that we possibly could. So we had, I think, 5 camera guys, and we had, yourself doing the announcing, and we had the commentary. And so we were really pushing to present a product that looked very professional and very something that somebody could watch and say, these guys look like they know what they're doing. Yeah. And looks like it's a professional sport. And so that's the element that we're pushing for.
Yeah. Was the Arm Gods guys are very much about almost recreating that atmosphere of a pub or a club or like a big social event. We've gone very much in a different direction with that, and gone with with the idea of presenting the arm wrestling as a professional sport. And so I kind of come to it from the perspective of, well, for arm wrestling to be accepted in the mainstream, it's got to be first and foremost watchable, and for somebody who's not familiar with the sport, for them to be able to cotton on really quickly about how it's run, have an understanding as to the format, know what the scoring system is, get a quick understanding of the rules so that they can quickly accelerate their knowledge to the extent that they can enjoy it as a viewing experience. And just to touch on before the keyboard warriors really get into it, why the attendance was low was you were quite right. I mean, the place was locked, not for the reasons I was saying, of course, but we were holding that event because we were seeking to appeal to the pay-per-view audience. We, instead of staging the event when the event that we were part of had begun, we actually started it earlier for the benefit of the pay-per-view audience. So we didn't have the benefit of thousands of people around the cage, as did, say, the MMA pay-per-view audience did. So if it was held, say, 6 or 7 hours later, there would have been 3,000 or 4,000 people there, and the atmosphere would have been certainly different. So granted, it didn't have a great atmosphere because we didn't have all of the people there and assembled, but there is a rationale as to why we did that. It was very much to make sure that the sport was watchable, digestible for an audience that wasn't able to be there in person, and we knew that the majority of that audience was going to be on the other side of the world and in the United States. So right. we did cater specifically for that online audience.
Exactly, and one of our goals or one of our points of direction is that we can recreate that anywhere. If we get our production right and we make it look and feel to the level that we want to make it feel, we can literally go anywhere in the world, and we're not reliant on having a live audience to support that. I mean, obviously we want people to come along, and if we do have a live audience, they will have fun. But it's not the Arm Gods model of regardless. You could put Paul Maiden in a room of people who have never seen arm wrestling before, and they will all be arm wrestling fans by the end of the day.
Or Paul Maiden fans anyway.
Yeah, that's right. He'll get them up and yelling and screaming and chanting and, really involved.
Yep.
Whereas what we're doing is, essentially we could go anywhere in the world and put on this high level of production, and it should ideally look and feel the same no matter where we are. It's only the athletes are going to be different. So,
and I guess we also had a look at some of those things. We'd had the benefit of seeing King of the Table and East versus West and these emerging promotions. And we took the view that having for our brand having a consistent level of presentation of the athletes was important. So instead of letting the one athlete turn up in jeans and a polo shirt, and the other guy turning up in torn shorts and a singlet.
Chaps.
Or chaps. It's always an option. We had a specific player uniform, as you might expect of a professional sporting league. And so there was a degree of uniformity with our branding for our athletes, and ultimately to make it more appealing to corporate sponsors as well. So essentially, if a large corporate's looking at an event, well, they want to know that their brand is going to be looking good. And if they're looking at an event and everybody on stage, or in our case in the cage, is looking good, then there's every chance their brand's going to be well represented. So we wanted to be certainly advertiser friendly, and we wanted to also ensure that we had a nice clean aesthetic, which we didn't see elsewhere in the arm wrestling world, with the exception of perhaps our Indian friends there at Pro Punja, who've got a very corporate look and feel and a lovely aesthetic to what they're doing. But in terms of the Western organisations, not so much. And so we brought that to the table. And I think there were a few innovations that came about through our observations as well of other promotions. For instance, how we adjudicate any conflict on the table amongst the athletes. So we tidied all of that up very, very nicely, and made that so that the athletes could simply, appeal a decision that would get looked at by a match referee, separate to the referee that was on the table. and that issue was adjudicated very quickly. People accepted the result and they moved on. So there was little emotion. So again, you don't have an athlete flaring up or yelling at a referee or carrying on in an unprofessional manner. We just didn't create that opportunity. You know, the athlete would seem silly to when they've got the opportunity to refer it to a higher power and have a replay reviewed, and to have an opportunity to have that seen fairly, and it helps everybody move on. But it also makes the sport look more professional.
Exactly.
The instant replays, just a wonderful feature that doesn't seem to pop up elsewhere in the arm wrestling world, and where something great may happen or there might be an issue, and it just seems to take forever to get back to that moment. Almost, if you're watching the pay-per-view, you're scrolling back yourself to get that instant replay, whereas we saw that as a deficiency in terms of production, and we're able to incorporate the replays so that for the fans at home, you know, they could see what was happening, they could see the replay, they could see what the match referee was looking at, and if there was a foul or a micro foul or some kind of consternation over a call of the referees, well, they were all part of that, and they could see exactly what those in a position of power were able to look at as well. So from that perspective, it was great. I think in terms of atmospherics, if I had to be honest, I would say it was probably a 3 out of 10. I felt like a couple of those shots of you and Ryan sitting seemingly in the middle of an oval by yourselves with the T-shirt over your head, or over Ryan's head, early on. So those types of, if we had 2,000 people sitting around the cage, obviously it feel a whole lot different. But I'll give ourselves some ticks for presenting the aesthetic very nicely, and for being bold enough to also hold it in an ISCA certified cage. From what I understand is a first in the arm wrestling world as well. Certainly a point of difference for the audience, and again just elevates the sport from being in bars and sheds and putting it onto a world stage in on a sporting platform that's acknowledged and utilised by, well, the fastest growing sport in the world in UFC and MMA.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, as you said, with the replays, I thought that was an amazing addition. The fact that we had a couple of times when the athlete questioned, and it was just simply, can I just get a replay on that? And it's like, yeah, no worries. And then can we just get a replay? And then within 10 seconds, there's the replay. No, that wasn't an elbow foul. Okay, yeah, keep going. You know, it was just that easy. It was just, and there was no conjecture about, or no aggression, like, oh, that's ridiculous. I need to, I demand a replay, and if I don't get it, it's going to be, it was none of that. It's just like, well, you have 2 opportunities to call for replays, and if you are correct with your call, you keep those 2. If you're wrong, then you lose one. And you've got to be careful about what you choose to ask for replays for. But it's just like, oh, I just get a replay. Yeah, it's like, no problems. Yeah, that's cool. We'll check it out.
I think because we've come from the perspective of let's create something that's more corporate in look and feel, that comes through from our governance top down. And so where you've got East versus West highly dependent on one personality, where you've got King of the Table highly dependent on one personality, where you've got Monster Factory highly dependent on Michael and Rebecca to deliver, and with Armed Gods you've got the 2 boys there. I don't think they endured the same difficulties perhaps moving forward, especially given the business acumen that sits behind them. But from our perspective, we've got a brand that kind of stands alone and an organisation that stands alone. So, if something happened to Dave Stockbridge, well, it's not going to affect AWE. Same if it was Ryan Bowen. As a matter of fact, we had a lovely little story through just this week where Ryan, who, I mean, he's obviously very involved in AWE. One of our big names. He's one of our marquee athletes in AWE, and went to the servo or the service station or the gas station, as you might call it in America. Went to the gas station, and as he went inside, the chap said, and Ryan was wearing his AWE shirt, much like yours, as displayed. You can buy one of those yourself at AWE store right now. And get yourself a hat and a hoodie whilst you're there. But he was wearing the AWE shirt without the automatic chest flexing function, and
it's a button on the side.
It's a little electrode, and the guy behind the counter said to Ryan, "Oh, are you an athlete in AWE?" And Ryan's like, "Yeah." Don't you know who I am?
That's second rank in Australia.
Yeah, I'm like number 2 in Australia.
Co-founder of the actual organisation.
But he was like, "No, yeah, I'm number two in Australia." And he went, "Oh, wow, that's awesome. That's really cool." So yeah, I've been following it, and you know what? I really like Marcus Sitirai, the Tahitian wrecking ball. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him up against Gunter Baikov's. Like, I think it's great that he's going for the title. And so this guy knew everything about AWE, but didn't know who Ryan Bowen was in front of him. And Ryan said that was the greatest thing ever, because now he feels like the brand isn't dependent on him. He's not having to carry the organisation with his own profile and presence. And so that the AWE brand very much stands on its own, and it's not dependent on that one personality or that one name that people know of. And so I think that's some vindication as to the corporate look and feel that we've created. But atmospherics 3 out of 10, corporate look and feel. I think we're on the right path there. In terms of production values, I'd give ourselves a 7. I think there's a lot of movement that we can make with respect to that, but I still think we're doing it better than maybe a couple of the big boys. I'll put it that way. And for arm wrestling fans that want to see what we do with the atmospherics at our next event, that'll be staged at the Adelaide Oval in the McGarry Room, which is the Adelaide Oval is a very prestigious sporting venue. And again, we wanted to elevate the sport out of clubs, out of sheds, and put it on a world stage where the biggest sporting events in the world, when they come to Australia, they make their way through the Adelaide Oval. So we're really excited about that, and honoured that we're now considered amongst those top promotions in the Western world now. We're looking at East versus West. We're looking at King of the Table, and we're learning the lessons, and we're also trying to come up with some of our own innovations and ideas in order to make the sport more accessible for viewers and athletes alike. And sitting in behind all of what we do at AWE is really a culture of bringing that next generation of athlete through. We don't want to actually have the King of the Table East versus West model where we're highly reliant on the big names for our pay-per-view sales. That's not what it's all about. For us, it's about bringing together athletes, that helping them build their profile so that they can become pros in the sport themselves, and realise their ambition of dropping off their full-time job and making arm wrestling their forever gig. And we've got some really exciting talent. We've got guys in their 20s and 30s. We've uncovered a 19-year-old South African that holds Ryan Bowen in the middle of the table and his arm wrestled on about a handful of occasions. We've uncovered some spectacular talent, and for us it's like ability is one thing, but the next thing is how do we build a profile, how do we assist these athletes in terms of realising a revenue stream that is arm wrestling derived as a result of them having a profile in the sport. So we're working really closely with our athletes to try and realise that ambition, and that's a big plank of our platform moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just going well, and it's very exciting times, and things are coming together, and yes, it's one of those things where you're sort of like, oh, this is so exciting. I can't believe that this idea that has been formulated is been put into play and put into practice. And I mean, this is only since November of last year, which is 6 months ago.
Yeah, it really is.
And we've got everything up and running, and we're heading in the direction that we've always wanted to. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Exciting times ahead, and you know, East versus West, king of the table. We wish them all the success in the world, and we really want to see the sport grow on all levels. But for us, it's really exciting. Not what's happening there. To me, that's not actually exciting to me. As a fan, yeah, I mean, it's always fun to see those matchups and see some of those big names collide. But I think most of the questions that anybody's got to answer about the top 4 or 5 in the world have probably been answered now.
Yeah.
And I think the real question mark in the sport now is who's next?
Yes.
What's the next generation looking like?
Yeah.
Where are they coming from? And that's, for me, that's the really exciting thing.
Yeah.
That's what really what I want to uncover. And I love that Arm Gods and Monster Factory are those places where those athletes can find their way. And of course on AWE as well. So I'm really excited for those organisations that are providing a platform for that next generation of athlete, and I'm excited to see those athletes filter through. Yeah. It'll be really interesting in 5 or 10 years' time to see if East West versus West is still that I guess holding that hallowed position in the sport, or king of the table, whether it's still held with the same degree of reverence as what it is now, or even if it's still here. But I've got a feeling that Monster Factory is still going to be here, Arm Gods are still going to be here, and AWE is definitely going to be around.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome, mate. Well, great insights as always, Hollywood Matt Connelly. It's been fantastic to share the microphone with you one more time, and of course to see those double biceps is well, I mean, it's just amazing to be able to stand here or sit here and to look across the table and to almost touch them. It's just
$5 a touch.
It's truly something. So, and to our audience and to those fans that buy the pay-per-views and people that are buying the shirts and getting their hats and their hoodies, thank you so much for your support. To that guy in the service station, we love you. We hope you're watching, mate, because you're the reason why we're here. And to all of the athletes that are wondering, how do we get on an AWE card? Well, it's really simple. Hollywood Matt Connelly is on all the socials. You can send a little message and just let him know one day I want to be on AWE, and we'll do all we can to find a way for you.
Absolutely.
I'm Dave Stockbridge.
Hollywood Matt Connelly.
And we will see you next time.
Thank you.